Hi, I'm Dr. Rudy Cashman, and welcome to our Mind, Body, Spirit show. We've been doing this over 5 years because during my practice of neurosurgery for over 45 years, I noticed the majority of patients I saw, frankly, 70–80%, could get well if I would coach them. Proper health habits, how much they exercise, proper eating, and I went through it. I experienced it. I know what it takes. And today we're going to speak about a very interesting subject called placebo, nocebo. I rarely speak to anyone, including providers, to know what nocebo means. And I'll explain that shortly. But before we start on that, let's just talk about wellness a little bit. I've written the magic, what I consider the Magic 8, the Culture of Wellness Circle. You can see it on the screen right now. And now briefly go through the 8. You can get copies of this by looking at cashmanhealth.com, and we can you can reprint it right off of there. But number 1 on this list of 8 is that we have to accept some self-responsibility for our illness. We must participate in a health care. I see, frankly, not a great deal of that. I used to love it when in intensive care, for example, there'd be a relative sitting with a yellow pad and a pencil, and they would write down everything that each different specialist doctor came in and said. And it was a wonderful record. And then they could go home and help coach the patient when they went home. I loved that. And you must use the internet and books and read and get second opinions. We don't follow just the pill to the ill. That's medicine today. No one's got time to talk to you. And they're sitting on the computer putting the information in. No one looks you in the eye. That's not very healing. And I'm trying to get around that by encouraging you to participate in the healthcare. And you'll find after today's talk on placebo, nocebo, that the words of the provider are critical. They are critical. So, but number 1 is you must participate in your health care, okay? By reading and getting other opinions and talking to other people, looking at the internet. Then number 2 is nutrition. Nutrition is high in wellness. What you are eating. Are you eating essentially a fat diet? Are you eating a lot of sugar? My latest book, incidentally, is going to be on Amazon within a week, called The New Slavery. It's about sugar, because sugar causes the majority of our illnesses. So you need to learn about nutrition. Look at my website, and you get all the information that you will need. Physical fitness, but you can exercise 3 times a day, which I almost do sometimes now. That'll improve your health, get you the right attitude. But if you're overweight and getting type 2 diabetes, for example, with all these chronic diseases attached to it, physical exercise alone will not do it. You'll have to eat right. That's 70–80% of it. So remember that. And I think to look at spirituality in your life. I find people who are spiritual in some belief, no matter what religion, believe in something, they do better. They do better because their belief system speaks to their brain. Our brain speaks to our body. And I'd like to bring it up right here. Candace Pert wrote a book, 1972, and she discovered the receptor sites, the opiate receptor site. We have 70 trillion cells, but they have these receptors that stick up out of there. And like for the one she discovered, the opiate one, where morphine comes in and hits these receptors and sends a message to the cell, tells it what to do. Well, we found out they're all over our body. She's the first one to prove it, and she proved that our brain makes hormones, neurotransmitters, and neuropeptides that are secreted by your thought process, and they go all over your body. So how we think is critical. Then she finds out the monocytes that are in our Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines that defend our body, our immune system, also make them. The monocytes make them. So it's brain, body, it's body, brain. And So when you think positively or negatively, and we're talking about placebo, nocebo, has tremendous effects on your body. Next, this is a way of life. So you have to learn. You have to gain some knowledge to understand this, and it's a way of life. It's about how you use your fingers, what you put on your forks, whether you exercise or not, how you think, what toxins you're exposed to. When does education begin? Education begins before conception, before conceptions, because of epigenetics. What the mother and father, whether they're smoking, what they're eating, how much they're exercising, will affect the gene structure of the baby. And then what the mother eats and drinks, whether she smokes or not, takes drugs or not, while the baby's in the uterus, will affect the child. So education of that child begins before conception. Depends on what the mother and father did. Then I'd like you to learn a little bit about the mind-body connection, which we talked about. Candace Pert's work. I wrote a book called Welcome to Your Mind-Body. It's on the Amazon. It tells you how your thought process influences your body. I stress out, my bowels react. Somebody else stresses out, that's how the heart reacts. So we need to learn that mind-body connection. And lastly, I want you to get blood testing no matter what, at least once a year starting at birth. You know, they say, well, get your blood test done every 5 years. In 5 years, a lot of bad things can happen. Testing is getting so cheap. New companies are coming along. It'll be like $40 for the blood test. Very cheap. Insist on it yearly. So now let's go on with the nocebo placebo. What does nocebo mean? Well, it's the opposite to placebo. Placebo means I will heal. And you believe it, and the chances of the pill working, the procedure working, or even an operation working probably is 50 to 70%. That's called the placebo effect. You believe it, your brain speaks to your body. But nocebo is the antonym or the opposite of that. So if a provider speaks to you, or your interpretation of something is very negative, I'm going to die, or he says, well, you have cancer, this type of cancer, you'll be dead in 6 months. You'll be dead in 6 months. You need some hope. You need some hope. And we'll drive this point home. The nocebo placebo like a placebo can be an inert pill, it can be an injection, an operation, or a test that causes physiological changes in your body. Remember Candace Pert, molecules of motion? So how you feel about the injection, how you feel about the pill, the color, the size, or this operation is going to cure me, even if it does nothing and doesn't harm you, it really may help you because you believe it. I saw that in my practice all the time. So it's based on the belief of the patient, based on the belief of the patient. So nocebo, a definition, is a causation of sickness or even death because of the expectation of sickness or illness by the belief of the patient. The expectation is induced by the action of a healer. Are you going to a negative person? Are you going to a positive person? Do they give you a hug? Do they properly explain it to you? Or do you just talk to them and they just, here's a script, see you in a year? A lot of difference there. So we use it every day. I've asked many providers if they knew what the word nocebo meant. Never met a one. The only ones I ever met, the one that had attended my lectures and they read Candace Pert's book or heard me say it, they knew it. But it's shameful that it's not taught in the medical school. And I read a very interesting book recently, Shapiro's, The Powerful Placebo, but she never hardly mentions in there the nocebo. It's this excellent book on the placebo. Every person should read it, especially providers, medical students, about the positive effect of the placebo to heal the patient. But nocebo is hardly discussed. So that's a major mistake. But the history of the placebo, which goes back thousands of years, how they used oils, and the Egyptians were very enamored with crocodile dung, for example. And as long as the patient believed it, a lot of them get better. It went back thousands of years. So this is an excellent book to read. But it is in Webster's dictionary. The word nocebo is in Webster's dictionary. So let me tell you a few stories, interesting stories about the nocebo effect. I had a school teacher, maybe 47 years old, slightly overweight. They did an MRI, handed her a 5-page report. They described all the normal drying out of the disc, degenerative disc disease, but that's not a disease. That's part of getting a day on, okay? You can have that, have no symptoms whatsoever. And the radiologist didn't say consistent with age 47 or the body size. He every single thing he saw, and then the family doctor read it, the patient read it, and he comes in, she wants a back fusion. Her provider had never asked, and what's going on in your life? Well, the story was her husband left her 3 months ago, and she lost her job last week, and they had 3 children. Well, wouldn't you start having some symptoms? She could have come depressed, but she developed headaches, low back pain, and that was her brain, which was stressed out and maybe have some depression, speaking to her body. She didn't walk in the office, I'm depressed because of what happened to me. She went to the office and said, I had a backache. And her provider did not know her history in detail. To top it all off, it was a beautiful day, and I could see that she had a scar down here. Yeah, that's true. So I asked about that. She had normal cholesterol, negative family history, no diabetes, no reason to have vascular disease, but she was having atypical chest pain, which is the biggest cause of chest pain in women. 75% of it was from stress. And they had done an angiogram because no pill worked. They weren't speaking to her. They were just trying different things. The ill to the pill to the ill, but nothing was working. And she had no positive thinking. They split her chest open. Yeah, took out a little bit of vascular disease in the right coronary, which isn't very significant. And then nothing to indicate general vascular disease. And I suspect the pain she had was not angina because they gave her nitroglycerin, did not relieve the pain. And no one figured out that she was having a mind, body, spirit illness. And they operated on her. She was better for 3 months. Why was that? The placebo effect of the operation is why she was better. And then the pain returned. And she had the low back pain, but then I worked on her from a stress reduction standpoint, and she got better. Here's another interesting one that I saw. A lady from Van Wert, 39 years old, 4 kids, no husband, very dark clothes, looked very depressed, and she was going to have her neck fused in 4 days because her MRI indicates some degenerative disc disease, which is normal at age 39, no big rupture disc, nothing like that. They were going to fuse it. She's very depressed looking. I spent 1 hour with her. I don't spend an hour with every patient, but you got to pick the right one. I spent an hour with her. And then in trying to talk her out of the operation, then I thought about her now and then, but never heard from her again. And about 2 years went by, and it must have been, the spirit or universe or whatever. She's sitting there, has a red skirt on, a yellow sweater, heavy lipstick, beautiful black hair. And I think the spirit of the universe made me say, couldn't believe it. And I said, are you from Van Wert? Because I think about that lady now and then. And she said, she goes like this. And then I went like this to her, and I explained this to her. The first time I'd seen her, she also showed me 4 things that on her knuckles, and it was down to bone and tendons. You could see it. And I went home and started looking up what the devil that was. Then I looked at the cutting and find out this is what she was doing. This is what she was doing, and wore skin off completely. But when I was looking at this patient, I went like this. Is this you? She said, yes, it all healed. She is happy now. You can see the way she dressed. Remember, she was wearing black clothes. So she was noceboed by her provider and placeboed by me, and she got well. A case I'll never forget. So that kind of gives you an example. The real extension of nocebo could be the voodoo effect. Ancient tribesmen, if they pointed their finger at someone that didn't have good relations with the tribe, and the shaman put his finger at him, and if that person, the tribesman, believed that he has been ostracized from the tribe, they'd be dead within a day or so. Yes, and they've demonstrated that's an actual effect. It's neurofibrillary degeneration of the heart, pulmonary hypertension, and they die. It's called the voodoo effect. So the nocebo is a step backwards from that. Very interesting. That has been scientifically proven. There was a neurologist from Harvard gave a talk at a neurosurgery meeting in Boston, and he spoke only of the voodoo effect, but he never spoke about the nocebo when I was writing a book on it. I was writing a book on it at the time. I was very disappointed because I went up to him afterwards, and he said, well, I'm on vacation, and remember, he's the head of neurology in Harvard. I'm going on vacation. You can send me an email. Well, that was a nocebo to me, and I've been disappointed, frankly, ever since. But I was at that time, I was writing a book on it. You go to Amazon, look at Cash and Books. You get a book on those, easy to read. You can read it in one night. But this is critical. This is critical to teach providers this when they're speaking to the patient. It's not just about CTs and MRIs. I even have a chapter in that book called MRI Doctors. They hand out these huge reports. Of course, they never saw the patient. And then these huge reports are misread by the patient and the provider, and they start doing things to the patient maybe they didn't need. I saw that a lot in my 45 years of neurosurgery. And I pointed out to you. Dr. Herb Benson from Mass General, he runs a Mind-Body Institute there. He calls placebo remembered wellness. What's he saying? Your body remembers how to get well. Wow. Well, that's an interesting thought. Well, let's face it. You get a cut. If it's not too big, you don't need stitches. Your body knows how to fix it. Yeah. Through evolutionary history, your body knows how to get you well the majority of the time. 50, 70% of the time, as long as you give them a chance. You watch what you put on your fingers and how you use your forks, put on your forks and how you use your fingers, and whether you exercise or not. Positive thinking, negative thinking, all affect healing. This is what I'm trying to tell you. So what's the best definition of placebo? I mean, there are many definitions, but a medicine, a procedure, or a test that is ineffective in itself, but may help relieve a condition because the patient has tremendous faith in it. So very interesting. So sometimes I see somebody that look to me like they didn't need that procedure, whatever it was, a pain injection or maybe even a knee or back operation, but they get well anyway. They believed it. I did it accidentally sometimes, where in retrospect I thought, geez, I didn't find nothing, but they got well anyway. It was a placebo effect. And so Dr. Shapiro says the history of medicine, that's a book I refer to, is a history of the placebo response. You know, thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago, they used bloodletting, for example. They used leeches. They used all sorts of obscure herbs and things. As long as the patient believed it, most of them get well. Chinese medicine, Mao Zedong had them get rid of Chinese medicine, which was ridiculous. He found out himself. He brought it back 5 years later because he wanted only Western medicine, was modern medicine. Found out very few get it well, and it was getting very expensive. And the Chinese pharmaceutical books had in them like 2,000 prescriptions. And they used the same ones, the same medicines for thousands of years. And 90% of the time, they worked. Of course, they made an art of it too. You go to a pharmacy and they be mixing your medicine, put a big show about it, and that increased the belief of the patient. It healed many people. Remember, George Washington died from bloodletting. You know, he died from bloodletting. But that helped a lot of people too, because people believed it. As long as you didn't take out too much blood, okay? Sir William Osler at the turn of the 1900s of that century wants you to treat as many patients as soon as possible with a new drug while it still has the power to heal. You know, they have new medications, and they have to be tested, double-blind studies, which can cost $80 million. And the reason is because your belief, the placebo effect of a medication can be huge. So when they say, oh, this medicine really works, you need to give us FDA approval, find out, well, geez, 80% of it could be because what you believe, because your neurotransmitters, neuropeptides, and hormones, 50 hormones in our body, are healing you, not the medicine. So medicine needs to be evaluated. The basic therapeutic effect, certainly if you get a strep throat, take penicillin. It has tremendous therapeutic effect, okay? But many medications don't have that. You get side effects. Watch TV today about all those diabetic medications. When you list all those side effects, it's scary. Of course, they're wiping out the placebo effect of anything that medication might have, which is sad because some of them help a lot, but some of them don't help that much. And you need the placebo effect. So treatment is therapeutic gain plus the natural history of the illness. Maybe the doctor within you is going to heal that illness, and then the placebo effect, the natural history of the illness, and then the drug effect. You see how tough it is to evaluate medications. I see a lot of 85-year-olds, 88 years old, they're on 15 to 20 medications. That's ridiculous. You need to stay on the life-saving medications. Don't stop any, because I didn't say to stop any, but go to the provider and say, how many of these are life-saving? How many of these do I absolutely need? Because medications are expensive and they're dangerous. If you add up all the side effects these medications cause, if you really knew the medications, I don't think you'd be handing those to grandma. Maybe you might not even take them yourself. So primitive societies uses shaman, medicine men, witch doctors to heal people. Dr. Schweitzer, you know, in Africa, the German guy like me, in 1910, he's in Africa. I read a lot of his histories. Unbelievable man that he survived all those years, but he did, and he did not castigate the shaman, because the shaman could help half the people, and then he operated 30% of them. Can you imagine this guy in the jungle operating people, barely any anesthetic? And he got most of them well. The most common operation he said he did was a hernia. Yeah, interesting. But if you read about him, it's unbelievable. So he felt that the attitude of the patient, what he believes, and the shaman could heal probably half the people. He demonstrated to Norman Cousins, who was visiting him. And remember, Norman Cousins wrote about laughter and healing when he was sick. He visited him in Africa, would you believe it or not? So what does it take for the patient to heal just on your word or just on a procedure? A fearful clientele, the more fearful they are, who believes in the powers to heal, in a vivid imagination, because if you have a picture, a vision, an image, more likely leads to healing. So to describe an image to, like the shaman, they would dance and provide an image and music and laughter to confront the menacing natural world, can lead to healing. So harmful treatments lasted well into the 20th centuries. The bloodletting and things, leeches and things that we used. I mean, they certainly potentially harmful. I mean, it killed some people. It killed George Washington. They lasted well into the 20th century, but they got a lot of people well. Remember the Chinese book story? But now, what do we have now? We now have more nocebo treatments than placebo. Yeah. Why is that? You know, we see people with a mind-body illness, headaches, neck pain, irritable bowel, for example, skin rashes, migraines. For example, we get them well with conservative treatments. But today, we used to call it hysteria, 1800s, Freud. Then was neurasthenia, 1850, 1920, 1954, 1950. Alexander wrote a book, Psychosomatic Disease. Okay, and he lists the different illnesses the human mind can do to the body, which I mentioned a few already. Atypical chest pain, irritable bowel, skin rashes. Negative thinking can even help produce cancer. Lashan proved that. But now we don't hear about psychosomatic disease, for example. And not a term that patients particularly like. Fibromyalgia maybe is the closest as you can get. But now we're using technology, CTs, MRIs, fancy blood tests. We do 100 blood tests and then act on the ones that really don't mean a lot. Here's a pill. Here's the 10 pills you're going to take to get you well. And you even get that out of some wellness doctors. So you got to be careful. They should be treating you with simple things, not many prescriptions. Maybe just eating 70-80% vegetables and fruits and 20% organic meat. Something simple, not so complicated. Not try to sell you so many pills. I see in town now they're selling all these juices and different things you rub on and things that you can eat. And well, I tell you, there have not been double-blind studies with any of them. But as long as you believe it works, it very well may work. But the darn trouble is some of these salves you got, they have to be detoxified by the liver, and there have been problems. And if you substitute taking one of these little supplements and think that's the only thing you got to do, you're making a big mistake. You got to follow good health habits of exercise and watch what you put in your fingers in your forks, and not just this one substance. But as long as you believe, it can have some value. Remember, I said that already. So a placebo can be a surgery, a device, a pill. Just because you tell me that operation cured you, knowing what I know, maybe it did and maybe it didn't. If we know you had a tumor sitting like that and it's gone, okay, I'll take that one. Okay, you had to use your ruptured disc and your pain, now the leg is gone, you're moving your foot again, I'll take that one. But a lot of the things I see today, like back fusions, the patients are noceboed by their MRI report. Remember, I said the word MRI doctors, and I mean every word of what I say. I lived that life. Remember, I was a neurosurgeon 45 years. So the medical team can be a placebo or nocebo. And I give an example. My son's a neurosurgeon, and he says, Dad, I'm starting to think like you. I don't expect everyone to think like me. And I've been around longer for one thing. He had a patient come in, maybe 39, that had a seizure, and an MRI scan indicated a small tumor, but we've experienced enough to know without biopsy that was a highly malignant tumor, okay? So he goes to the patient, and the patient, well, what is it, doc? Well, it looks like a glioblastoma, but we'll see by biopsy tomorrow. And how long get to live? Well, generally they live about 6 months. Not the way to talk to a patient. He knows it. He knows. And he brought it to me. Should have given us some hope, because you can, just because they give you percentages, those are statistics, but you're not a statistic. You're an individual person. There have been exceptions to everything. I had a patient with a malignant tumor like that, and I had a Mr. Williams, and the first thing he said to me when I met him, he says, I'm not going to die. And you know what happened? It took a heck of a long time. That 6 months turned into 5 years, and when he did die, I wasn't sure it was even from that, because the scan I did the week before didn't show any tumor. I think he'd been through a lot, maybe the medications, I don't know. But so the belief is very important. She started screaming all night, screamed all night. Next day, does a biopsy, slides came back, proof it's highly malignant, goes talks to her again, speaks to her again. Again, does a nocebo, negative talk. No hope, and no chance, not that 10% chance of, I'll do everything I can, we'll try a new research protocol, and projecting love and hope to the patient. By the next morning, the patient was dead. You know, I've already taught you why. I already taught you why. She was voodooed. It wasn't just placebo. She was voodooed, in essence, by the information at pulmonary hypertension, fibrillary degeneration, arrhythmia. Then next day, she was dead of a tumor the size of a nickel. Okay? So there's an example for you. Here's another one. Before we had CT MRIs, we used to do myelograms. You had to inject dye with a spinal tap needle, and it was a little bit painful. And if you weren't good at it, patients had significant pain. So I would sit the patient up on the x-ray table. That makes the spinal column bigger, easier to hit. And I never allowed the word needle to be used in the room. If you said the word needle, spinal needle, then the patient, boom, would go back and make it a lot tougher to do it. And so I never allowed the word to be used in there, and I'd be singing a tune, or now I'm taking singing lessons, so probably I would be singing a tune, or say something funny or something, and I would say to the patient, I will numb you now. Well, I was good at hitting the thing 99 times out of 100 on first stick, and I actually was doing the spinal tap. I wasn't numbing them. I never injected anything. But the patient believed I was numbing them, and then they say, well, doc, when are you going to do the spinal tap? I said, oh, I'm done. Yes, I did it for 30 years. It worked beautifully. If you use negative words, give me the long needle, give me the big needle. Oh, and the patient would tense up in the muscles, and you'd have a heck of a time doing it. Interesting story, but it's true. And so whatever a placebo may be, it can itself have no therapeutic effect. So if it's a blue pill, a big pill, whatever, itself, or an injection in the back without injecting anything, as long as you believe it might help, it did. And I know of pain doctors that actually did that, injected nothing. The nurses told me, and send the patient a bill anyway, and they did it on a regular basis. Yeah, I know of a pain doctor that did that. And he took advantage of the placebo, nocebo understanding. I'm not sure he knew that was the reason. So placebo effects can enhance in treatment, no doubt about it. They have great faith in the doctor. I used to pray with patients, actually. I learned that from Dr. Tu in Cincinnati, and I saw it work so effectively there that I brought it to my practice whenever I saw a priest, a rabbi, whoever, any religion. I obey the religion of the patient, not mine, theirs. And I took full advantage of it. I'd ask the priest, would you say a prayer before surgery? Or I always tell nurses when we're making rounds, if there's a priest, a rabbi, a Muslim, whatever, to take their hand, hold their hand, and say a prayer. And believe me, the healing improved. Oh yeah. Whenever I established that relationship with a patient, it was like this. It was like this. And I highly recommend providers pray with their patient. I did it on a regular basis. And so a doctor with a negative attitude towards a treatment or patient may compromise their treatment success. Patient hopelessness. Remember, hopelessness will secrete adrenaline, negative hormones and neuropeptides and neurotransmitters. They'll go to the receptors in the body, and they won't heal as good. So a rushed consultation in a noisy office interrupted by the phone can disturb any patient. And when I think of today, what they're doing now, they went from October the 1st, they went from 14,000 diagnoses to 70,000 the government put together. And now the doctor is married to the computer. We were before, but now they're really married to the computer. I know of a doctor, the diabetic doctor, that spends 3 hours a night recording the patient's histories and things in the evening after they come home. I mean, it's ridiculousness. But she refuses to let the computer come between her and the patient. I give her a lot of credit for that. I give her a lot of credit for that. But it makes it more difficult to remember the patient, when they're on maybe 10 different medications because they get diabetes. She's a diabetic doctor. And record that, that's not easy, but we give her credit for that. So Dr. Walter Cannon, in 1910, first one described the acute stress response, the sympathetic nervous system. The tiger's running at you, your pupils dilate, the bladder shuts down, the bowel shuts down, your heart starts racing, fat and sugar gets secreted in the blood because they think that tiger is going to kill you. But the thing is over like that. So you return to normal very quickly if you're alive, okay? But chronic stress, which was studied extensively by Hunt Seeley in Toronto in 1960s or so, published 1,000 papers. He stressed animals, and they no longer pay for research on animals on stress because he approved it. And when you are doing a nocebo to people, you're stressing them. You're stressing them. And you can then see how, and that activates the sympathetic nervous system, and that can be destructive to the body. The adrenal glands get bigger, the blood pressure shoots up, the heart starts beating quicker, it may even fibrillate. It affects the skin, you get skin rashes from stress. And he called it the adaptation syndrome, and many animals died from being stressed. Yeah, well, so do humans. So do humans, but a nocebo effect will cause secretions of the sympathetic. Now, if you teach them to relax and breathe deeply, take a walk, turn on some music, that's a parasympathetic hormone system, the autonomic nervous system, and you relax and you feel better. For example, and one way to do that is to do some deep breathing. Breath is direct communication to the electromagnetic energy of the universe. So if you do some deep breathing after a stressful day in neurosurgery, in the morning sometimes, I just kind of sit there and meditate, think of nothing, visualize walking down the beach, do some deep breathing. Remember, your breath is your only connection you have directly to the prana, the energy, the love of the universe, and my blood pressure would drop 30 points every darn time. But 10 deep breaths, interesting. So how to communicate with your thought process and your physiology of your body is kind of interesting. And the mechanism is, again, the neurotransmitters, the hormones, and neuropeptides. And there's something called the Hawthorne effect, and that's just doing studies. If you see a patient, I would see a patient have a lot of symptoms, and I've experienced enough. There are times I could say, they don't need an MRI. Well, a lot of patients just go right down the street, get an MRI, and go see somebody else, and they could do a nocebo on them. So to do some basic studies in certain situations, it's called the Hawthorne effect. That can cure a lot of people. So, but you have to watch, what does it cost? You know, we spend $3,000 or $100. But again, you need to know about the Hawthorne effect of negative studies. It does reassure the patient. So it's difficult. So the doctor who fails to have a placebo effect on his patient, I read this in a book, should become a pathologist. Okay, it's a joke, it's a joke. I knew many pathologists, the ones that look at the slides, we don't see patients with great personalities. That's not the point. But they don't need the placebo effect like the rest of us who are talking to patients. So the doctor himself can be a powerful placebo. There's no doubt. I hear many patients because I would give them a hug and they'd say, oh, I love my provider. And a lot of times there was a nurse practitioner because the nurse practitioner, every visit, had the time and gave them a hug. That's healing. They showed them love. I care about them. So if I can't help them with surgery many times, no doubt. I coach them. Yeah, and some people, no doubt, just wanted surgery, didn't appreciate it. You know, I get a letter once a month that would say, well, I want my money back because the doctor showed me how to do push-ups. He showed me how to eat right. He wanted me to look at his CDs, DVDs, and read his books and watch his TV show. Oh, yeah. I wish I'd saved those. I mean, I probably got about 20 of them because they would make a good book. But, you know, it's difficult. People have reasons to eat too much sugar, which is cause them to gain weight, and then they get diabetes and all these complications. There are reasons, maybe stresses in their life. So this is a judgment-free zone, judgment-free zone. I just make an observation. Every life is different, and many lives today are very stressed, causing us to eat, and sugar gives the quickest relief. Sugar is more addictive than cocaine, about 4 to 8 times. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that. So my latest book is gonna hit Amazon probably within 2 weeks, called The New Slavery, Sugar. Okay, very interesting reading. So the placebo effect is a product of successful human interaction, okay? And the nocebo effect, how you interact with the patient. So it requires someone who is deemed capable of what it takes to take care of another person. That's why, to me, it's very sad that I would bet money. I bet I'll give it $1,000 to IU if one medical student even knew what the word nocebo meant. That stands. That promise stands. I said it before a year ago in a show, and no one ever came and asked me for the money. And so providers and patients must come to share attitudes, needs, knowledge, beliefs, and a sense of empathy that create a healing plane. I think providers should know the religion of his patient. Yes. So take advantage of that if they can in some manner to bring spirituality to it. For example, Lourdes, for example, in France, and incidentally at Notre Dame. I didn't go to Notre Dame, but they have a Lourdes in back, and I visited many times. For one thing, Notre Dame allowed me to have book signings there, although I never gave to the university. I didn't go to the university. And I give them credit. They said, "Doctor, when you want to stand here during a football game and have people buy your books," right? I did. So I'm in love with Notre Dame ever since. And I visit the grotto in back because of the candles and Dooley's letter there describing his when he was dying in China many years ago. And instantly, you know what he said? Every time I read the letter, I've read it 5 times, you see something different. It's outside, right there. He said what he regretted most is having been at Notre Dame. He's writing to Hesburgh that when I was at the campus, I never really looked at it. So I've been many times, especially with my cousin August from New York, who knows trees real good. I know every tree in the Notre Dame campus. Oh yeah, and we look at the trees, I used to always go on the first rainy day when I was staying at the lake, and nothing to do. I go to the bookstore, tour the bookstore, and then take a walk. Going through the chapel, for example, I know every window in the chapel because a guy told it to me, taught it to me, and so it was healing. Just what can you imagine what me and my cousin felt like when we looked at every leaf, look at the biomathematics, the Fibonacci numbers of leaves, and you know we always would go on a rainy day. Then we started going on a sunny day. Why did I go on a sunny day? I've never seen that many beautiful girls in my living life. It's a true story. It was a true story. So a skeptical patient and an unfeeling doctor could cancel the placebo effect or even cause a nocebo effect. I think you understand that now. And so the nocebo effect is based on, it creates an emotional state, depression, anxiety, anger, hopelessness. So a negative health care provider could kill somebody or cause them to die early, absolutely. Nocebo is also no love in the family. Nobody cares about me. No one cares whether I live or die, okay? And so cardiac neuroses, atypical chest pain can be a nocebo. 75% of chest pain is due to anxiety, so unless you had a clear-cut heart attack, I think, hey, wait a minute, I want another opinion. Do I need that angioplasty? Do I need that heart operation? If I lost 20 pounds and ate a nutrient-dense diet, review the work of Dr. Esseltine of the Cleveland Clinic, where he took 25 advanced cardiac patients, taught them how to eat right, how to exercise, and bring some love into the family. He and his wife, Nancy. Those 25 patients, 23 are alive 20 years later. They were the most advanced 6 patients at the Cleveland Clinic. You need to be aware of that. You read his book. Dean Ornish, also a very good book on that. So it's all in your head. Don't ever say it. Even if you think it's a mind-body connection. a patient not going to do well doing that. Use rational, hopeful explanations and tell them what to do. So a physician's failure to make a full diagnosis and address that patient's fear and concerns may have a nocebo effect. You know, he gave me no hope. He didn't tell me what to do. He didn't teach me the diets. There's very little time. If you're not going to a provider that's willing to teach you some wellness, some alternative, could I, before I take that first diabetic drug, unless it's an emergency, obviously, could I eat a nutrient-dense diet and exercise more, and you recheck everything in 2 months? What do you think? Well, if he's totally unwilling, and once you hand you that initial drug right away, and it's not an emergency, it's not insulin saving your life, you might get a second opinion, because a lot of people, I teach it. I teach it, and part of the diabetic team at the Lutheran Hospital teaches it, that you can have a pretty good chance of getting rid of type 2 diabetes 30 to 60 days if you do what we tell you to do. Not a diet, a different way of eating. We give a free lecture at Lutheran Hospital once a month on that. You can go to cashmanhealth.com. The date's on there. You know, you might get a second opinion. I mean, I want you to participate in your health care. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying you need to participate in health care. So in the placebo, symbolism is an important vehicle to avoid the nocebo response. The robes, the way the doctor dresses, the way he acts, whether they give you a hug or not, and the evil eye may not be delivered, but your fears alleviated, and you get better because there's that doctor living within you, okay? So the tone of the voice can make a difference. I used to have a nurse, Brian, 6'6", long hair, didn't dress the best. I'm not sure the best nurse I ever had, but the patients loved him more than me. Personally, I don't think it's easy to do, but he damn well did it, and he did it because he had a soft voice. It was healing. Little kids would call the office and say, "Do you think Brian can come back and see me once more?" People would call from the floor. That was common. Be walking down the hall, meet a stranger on the elevator. We always approached the stranger, said nice things. You're dressed nice. You're looking good. Are you having a great day? And this is in the hospital. It put a placebo into them. And he moved to Indianapolis. I was really sorry when he left. Brian was a fantastic nocebo. I think it was his soft voice. And he projected love, no doubt about it. I must have had 3,000 phone calls after he left. Yeah, it's a true story. So the computer in your hand may have a nocebo effect on the patient if you're not looking at the patient, okay? So you understand why the diabetic doctor that I work with doesn't use a computer till the home. I don't recommend that, but she didn't want the computer between her and the patient, interesting. So we must learn about the causes of placebo, nocebo effects medically. It's critical. It needs to be taught at the medical school level. And open discussions of even the most sensitive topics, frank admission of the limitations of treatment, realistic appraisal of what the future may bring, alternatives, outcomes, trying to be positive as possible, and to give some hope is important. So the placebo effect is the only single action which all drugs have in common. All drugs have in common some placebo effect, unless you have a very negative, hopeless patient. They have some placebo effect. So when they're studying drugs, that's why it is so expensive, because to do double-blind studies, to see, have control groups where they just hand them that big red pill, but it's inert, has nothing in it. The patient still gets better. That's a placebo effect. You get the idea? Okay? And so for hundreds, thousands of years, the mysticism, the antidote, the belief, the tradition were more prevalent than science in the healing arts. But now the nocebo, the CT, the MRI, the drugs can So we need to develop double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trials. But I noticed a lot of the equipment they use for back fusions, for example, have never had a clinical trial. They've checked them to see if the foreign substance is tolerated by your body. The FDA has done that, but they've never run long-term clinical trials. They did them in Europe, and I noticed they're not paying for back fusions very much anymore. So some of them are helpful. I did some myself, helpful, but I'm concerned about the rate of them today. And so many of our major medical procedures have not undergone double-blind studies, okay? It may be scientific evidence that factors certain treatments, but it has not been proven. You need to find out before you have something done. Have they done studies on this? Have they done studies on this? So evidence-based medicine is a conscientious, explicit, judicious use of current best evidence from clinical care research and making decisions about the care of the individual patient. It's tough. I'm empathetic with the patient here. It's tough. You need to, if you have time, get multiple opinions. So randomized clinical trials are very expensive, and that's where we do it. You know, just do the procedure, maybe a blood test or whatever, and make an inert pill, for example, and then using the pill and using different dosages, run clinical trials. That's expensive. If there was no placebo, nocebo, if there was no effect from our brain or in our body, Candace Pert's work, Molecules of Emotion, Welcome to Your Mind Body, a book that I wrote. You know, I was speaking the other day at a local lectures. I was given one, and Paul Wilson from the Psychiatric Institute on State Street there, he was given a talk, and he had not read either one of those two books. But he said 50% of the people going to provider have mild, medium, or severe depression, but they come in not saying that. They come in with decorated symptoms: headache, neck pain, atypical chest pain, irritable bowel, skin rashes, bladder spasms, chronic pain. They decorate their depression. 50%. Can you imagine if we figured out that 50% properly diagnosed them, and we properly diagnose type 2 diabetes by running blood tests earlier, testing every year instead of sometimes every 5 years, how much money we could save in healthcare? Probably $1 trillion. Probably $1 trillion, I would say. So that smells of opportunity. So belief in surgery is widespread. It's uniquely positioned to maximize the placebo effect. The patients can be noceboed by the scans, the MRIs, by their doctor, by a friend who said, the surgery cured me. But one case doesn't mean nothing. Doesn't mean nothing. May have had a different problem. So, and I would say many providers have no living idea of the placebo-nocebo effect. What I'm saying today is critical to you. Okay, just by YouTube, you can watch this again. And I wrote a book, Nocebo, the evil twin. Okay. Dr. Dean Ornish, very famous, Stopping and Preventing Heart Disease. Ornish, 20 years ago, we published The Proper Diet Would Eliminate 90% of heart disease. He's, in his book, Spectrum, says doctors do what they get paid to do, and what they get paid to do is taught in the medical school. I blame the medical school. They need to teach us this is more critical than biochemistry or organic chemistry, because this, how we speak to a patient, we experience every day, all day long. You know, they used to do internal mammary artery ligation surgery for heart problems, and then they did a double-blind study, found out had nothing to do with it. It was the expectation of the patient. You'll see that too in cholecystectomy, some of the arthroscopic surgery, and in all fields of surgery, sinus surgery is seen to some extent. I'm just being open-minded about it. I did 200 operations a year. I know darn well about it, and I'm sure I did some, not meaning to, but retrospectively, when I found nothing, and the patient got well anyway. So what does it take to get a patient well with a placebo effect? A patient with an illness that he's greatly concerned about. The more they're concerned about this little click in their knee or little pain in their neck, the more likely they will respond to the placebo effect of the procedure, which can be an injection, can be a pill, it can be an operation. I think I think you understand it now, what I'm speaking about. So the surgeon himself must project confidence. The nurses, the orderlies, the interns, the way they're dressed, the way they look, the way they smile, if they, okay, or they bring in the spiritual hero like I did, had placebo effect, and the patient expects to get well, they're much more likely to get well. So these positive circumstances are ideal for the placebo effect. So the greater the emotional expectancy, the more likely to have a good result. Mark Twain said, anything will cure if the patient's faith is strong enough in it. Well, that's the history of medicine. The history of medicine in his Shapiro's book, The Placebo Effect, it's right in there. 70% of the nations in the world do use some complementary alternative medicine. I don't like to call it that. I call it mainstream medicine. So let's summarize all this a little bit. I think you need to participate in your health care. I think you need to do some reading, maybe get some other opinions, unless it's an emergency. You fell out of an airplane, you get a broken leg, for Pete's sake, get it fixed, okay? I'm just saying, if you have time and if you can, kind of study things a little bit. It's not fair to a provider if you don't participate in your health care. Learn about nutrition, other shows, and remember, you can go onto cashmanhealth.com, resources, 120 YouTube shows, all for free. Fat, salt, sugar, gluten, narcotics, pain, everything is all for free. And educate yourself. If you do this, you will participate in your health care. We have many, and I appreciate the public access having these shows for us. I'm doing an hour and a half a week, and now, believe it or not, we're going to start a radio show. So I think we're getting the message out there. And you must participate in your health care, learn about proper nutrition and exercise regularly. Dr. David Katz says in his book, Disease Proof, that 93% of diabetes, 80% of vascular disease, 60% of cancer can be totally avoided by watching how you use your fingers, whether you smoke or take drugs, for example, what you put on your fork, what you're eating, and how you use your feet. You can avoid all those illnesses. He's 35 years, the biggest public health official in the nation at Yale University. I met him. This is the way I've been talking for years. It's confirming what I've been saying. So let's spread the love. Let's get some knowledge. Learn to understand the placebo, the nocebo. Odds are, if you understand that, you'll know more than this person you're speaking to. We love you all. Thank you very much for watching. Watch our other shows, and soon we'll be on the radio too. Namaste, and you have a great day. And if you attend one of my free lectures at Lutherans, or shake my hand, give me a hug, and I'll be happy to speak to you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Public access, Fort Wayne. Dr. Wellness says namaste.